Hello. This lecture will be going over Chapter 4 in the Business-Driven Information Systems text, and that deals with ethics and information security. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act is a place where information technology, finance, and ethics all come together. According to critics, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act has caused a litany of ills. Executives are retiring early, public companies are going private, foreign firms are listing abroad, and U.S. firms are losing their competitive advantage. The sweeping law that was written in the wake of the Enron scandal has served as a scapegoat for all the evils facing corporate America since it was passed in 2002. Beginning in July of 2006, the law's foes will have had less reason to complain. Foreign companies listed on U.S. exchanges had to start complying with Sarbanes-Oxley beginning in the fiscal years ending after July 15th, 2006. So Toyota, Sony, HSBC Bank, British Petroleum, and hundreds of other companies that had previously escaped the law were forced to comply. So that's good news for U.S. companies. So in this lecture, we'll go over ethics and information security, the key points. So one of the key points in the chapter was to explain the ethical issues in the use of information technology. Information ethics governs the ethical and moral issues arising from the development and the use of information technologies, as well as the creation, distribution, and processing of information itself. And that can be with or without the aid of computer technologies. Ethical dilemmas in this area usually arise not as simple, clear-cut situation, but as clashes between competing goals and loyalties. Inevitably, there will be more than one socially acceptable or correct decision. And for this reason, acting ethically and acting legally are not always the same. Another thing that was in the chapter was to identify the 6 e-policies that organizations should implement to protect themselves. An ethical computer use policy contains general principles to guide computer user behavior. For example, it might explicitly state that users should refrain from playing computer games during working hours. An information privacy policy contains general principles regarding information privacy. An acceptable use policy is a policy that a user must agree to in order to be provided with access to corporate email information systems and to the internet. An email policy details the extent to which email messages may be read by others, and a social media policy outlines the corporate guidelines or principles governing employee online communications. An employee monitoring policy states explicitly how, when, and where a company monitors its employees. The chapter also went into the relationships and differences between hackers and viruses. Hackers are experts in technology who use their knowledge to break into computers and computer networks, either for profit or they're just motivated by the challenge. A virus is software written with malicious intent, and the intent is to cause annoyance or damage. Some hackers create and leave viruses, causing massive computer damage. The book also described the relationship between information security policies and an information security plan. Information security policies identify the rules required to maintain information security, such as requiring users to log off before leaving for lunch or for meetings, never to share their passwords with anyone, and the need for them to change their passwords every 30 days. An information security plan, on the other hand, details how an organization will implement the information security policies. The best way a company or organization can safeguard itself from people is by implementing and communicating its information security plan. So the book also provided examples of each of the three primary information security areas: authentication and authorization, prevention and resistance, and detection and response. Authentication and authorization are important for security. Authentication is a method for confirming a user's identity. Once a system determines the authentication of a user, it can then determine the access privileges or authorization for that user. Authorization is the process of providing a user with permissions, including access levels and abilities to use certain files. So it controls file access, hours of access, and also the amount of allocated storage space. Prevention and resistance are also critical to information security. Content filtering occurs when organizations use software that filters content, such as emails, to prevent the accidental or malicious transmission of unauthorized information. Encryption scrambles information into an alternative form that requires a key or password to decrypt. In a security breach, a thief is not going to be able to read encrypted information. A firewall is hardware or software that guards a private network by analyzing incoming and outgoing information for the correct markings. Detection and response is the third primary area of information security covered in this chapter. And intrusion detection software is a software package that features full-time monitoring tools that search for patterns in network traffic to identify intruders. Okay, so let's read your case study, 5 ways hackers get into your business. And we'll come back in about 10 minutes after you've read that and go over the key points. Okay, welcome back. Let's go over the key points to the case study. So, we need to define information ethics and information security and explain whether they are important to help prevent hackers from gaining access to an organization. Advances in technology make it easier for people to copy everything from music to pictures. Technology poses new challenges for our ethics. The principles and standards that guide our behavior towards other people is what we term ethics. Information ethics governs the ethical and moral issues arising from the development and use of information technologies, as well as the creation, collection, duplication, distribution, and processing of information itself. And again, this is with or without the aid of computer technologies. Ethical dilemmas in this area usually arise not as simple clear-cut situations, but as clashes between competing goals. Inevitably, there'll be more than one socially acceptable or correct decision. Information security is a broad term encompassing the protection of information from accidental or intentional misuse by persons inside or outside an organization. Both are critical to every organization. So, we need to identify 2 e-policies that a business could implement to ensure the protection of sensitive corporate data from hackers. So there's 6 e-policies that a business might want to include to protect its information. An ethical use policy contains general principles to guide computer user behavior. An information privacy policy contains general principles regarding information privacy. An acceptable use policy is a policy that a user must agree to follow in order to be provided access to the corporate information assets, such as email and the internet and other information systems. An email privacy policy details the extent to which email messages may be read by others. A social media policy outlines the corporate guidelines or principles governing employee online communications. And an employee monitoring policy states explicitly when and where the company monitors its employees. So we need to demonstrate how a business can use authentication and authorization technologies to prevent hackers from gaining access to organizational systems. Again, authentication is a method for confirming users' identities, and once a system determines the authentication of a user, it can then determine the access privileges granted to that user. Authorization is the process of providing a user with permission, including access levels and abilities. And this is for things such as file access, hours of access, and amount of allocated storage. So there's 2 levels that a hacker would have to get through in order to illicitly acquire or change information in the organization. They would have to get through the authentication screen, and then once they're authenticated, they would be restricted to the subset of information access for that particular user. And naturally, all that user's activities would be logged. So the extent of the breach could be determined afterwards. Next, we need to analyze how a business can use prevention and resistance technologies to safeguard its employees from hackers and viruses. And content filtering occurs when organizations use software that filters content, such as emails, to prevent the accidental or malicious transmission of unauthorized information. So this would prevent a hacker from being inside the organization as a mole and sending out proprietary information through emails or other communications with outside the organization. Encryption scrambles information into an alternative form that requires a key or password to decrypt. In a security breach, a thief is unable to read encrypted information. So that's another way we can protect ourselves against hackers. And a firewall is hardware or software that guards a private network by analyzing incoming and outgoing information for the correct markings. And we might be able to detect incoming information with viruses. And finally, we need to explain why hackers want to gain access to organizational data. Data includes the keys to the kingdom, and if a hacker gains access to your sensitive corporate data, they can easily destroy your business. Information security policies identify the rules required to maintain information security, such as requiring users to log off before leaving for lunch or meetings, never sharing passwords with anyone, and changing passwords every 30 to 45 days. An information security plan details how an organization will implement the information security policies. And the best way a company can safeguard itself from hackers is by implementing and communicating its information security plan. If an unethical contractor builds a government application, they could sell the information or the application to someone outside of the government. So our policies are designed to prevent that type of activity. Thank you, and see you next time for Chapter 5.